just going to take you through a couple of housekeeping matters and make sure that I do what I say I'm going to do, and make sure that we are recording. So we will be recording the session, and it will be available to those who are not able to attend today. You'll see that we've made it impossible for you to turn your video on and to unmute yourself. So you will be muted during the session, because we do have a number of attendees today, and it would make it very difficult to manage everyone. So please enter your questions or comments in the chat box. I'll be dealing with some questions from the audience later on in the session. So you're welcome to please add your questions, your insights, your experiences to the chat box. And when we reach the end of the session, I will try and address those with the panelists as well. So the format of the session is going to be that we will host questions with panelists that deal with virtual teams. I will be running 2 polls that will ask you to please share your opinions, and then we'll have the question and answer session from the audience after the fact. So the question might be, why would JVR want to hold a discussion on virtual teams? Virtual work has been a part of the way that we've worked at JVR for several years now. And we've also been systematically working towards being able to work more virtually over the last year. So when we faced the lockdown, we thought, yes, we're ready. And we embraced the opportunity with enthusiasm. But as many things, some things worked the way that we expected them to, and some things didn't. And in our discussions with our colleagues and with our clients in particular, we discovered that there are many others who are facing very similar challenges. And we felt that sharing our experiences and the insights that we've gained from our clients would at least help stimulate discussion and possibly help brainstorm and come up with solutions. So I'm very pleased to introduce our 3 panelists today, the MDs of the 3 companies within the JVR Africa group, Jopie de Beer from JVR Psychometrics, Renate Scherrer from JVR Consulting, and Karina de Bruin from JVR Academy. They've worked together for many years as a leadership team, and I know that they're really looking forward to sharing their experiences and their insights with you today. We're going to start by asking Jopie to give us a bit of a background to our session before we leap into the Q&A session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nicola. It's great to be able to talk to everybody today. I think the picture illustrates basically that life has turned on its head. There is massive change. There is, to many people's minds, a lot of chaos. And what is interesting about this is that we've been aware of this for a long time. You know, whether you think back on the Future Shock, the book that Alvin Toffler wrote in the 1970s, where just the name Future Shock says it all. So he was talking about imminent change, massive change. If you think back a number of years ago, the American Psychological Association as well, they were talking about major trends that was going to impact on all of us as people. Migration, globalization, disease, terrorism, global warming were things that they were talking about, taking very seriously, and what impact it would have on human behavior. More recently, all of us have been talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution. And there, words like volatility and uncertainty and complexity and unpredictability, the fact that things are ambiguous, that there's chronic change, automation, replacement of jobs, all those types of words, terminology was spoken about, published on, etc. Now, in this, everybody predicted the change. and everybody knew that it was coming. Mostly it was related to technology, what technology would be, how it would be impacting on human beings. But in fact, then COVID-19 happened. And with COVID-19, where we thought we had time to prepare still for this imminent change and the technology, overnight, basically, with the lockdown, the whole world was affected. It didn't change anything in terms of the change that was already happening. The change now, however, basically meant that we as human beings became central and core to all of the change. Our ability to manage, our ability to control, our ability to keep standing, our ability to feel safe or not has been massively impacted by C-19. So no more anticipation of what is to come. We are central core to that. And to a large extent, this has become a life and death issue. So whether we're talking about life and death on a physical level, but whether we're talking on an economic level, to a large extent it is, will we make it or will we not make it? Now, what is interesting about this is that we are all in a similar storm. So when we think about the storm and the fact that we're not in the same boat, we're in different boats, we need to think about this in a number of different ways. Actually, it's not just the C-19 storm. Actually, this is a superstorm. It's a storm that involves C-19 by all means, but it also involves the storm related to global warming. It also involves the storm related to sort of depression, anxiety, being of epidemic proportions in the world, that isolation is epidemic, that poverty, unemployment is epidemic. So this is not a single storm. The human beings, us all as people, are central to this, but it is actually a massive, a superstorm. And when we look at the boats, we are all in different boats in the same storm. And as the picture illustrates, some of these boats were going under even before the last C-19 storm struck us. So some people are already really finding it difficult to breathe and keep abreast. Other boats seem to be okay, but it would depend on the intensity and the length of the storm, whether these boats will all make it. So going into C-19, we were all in different boats. Some of them already showing structural problems, and others seemingly a little bit more strong. That relates very much to our individual wellness, wellness in the company that we work in, maybe our country as well. We're all in different boats. When we, however, look at it in a different way, to some extent, with C-19, as much as we anticipated technology to be the challenge, technology actually became the one way in which we could possibly better survive the storm. And the illustration that we've got here is, in terms of being pushed then to be able to work from home or be able to work virtually, was a little bit like being pushed out of an aircraft. And in terms of preparation, some of us actually had only an umbrella, others had a parachute, and many people just didn't have anything whatsoever, so are actually at this point in time in free fall. So whether we are talking about virtual work, virtual teams, working from home, it does make me think of a little joke where it is said that Sammy fell down a well. And somebody at the top of the well called down and said, "Sammy, are you okay?" And Sammy then answered, "I don't know, I'm still falling." Now, in terms of this virtual world, I think that is where we all are. We don't know, we're still falling. And from that point of view, it's great to be able to share with you today our own experience, our own perspectives. One last slide that we'd like to show you with all of that context is just in terms of literature, we fully acknowledge with our discussion today that the virtual work, having now been pushed out of the plane and having to survive either with or without a parachute, the general themes in literature includes many people talking about technology as part of business survival. How do you change your strategy? How do you change your structure? How do you remain competitive? Look for efficiency. Of course, many people are focusing on technology. What platforms should one use? How do you actually get the metrics you require? A lot of information is currently on organizational models and design. What should organizations look like? How should we rethink work? What should the workplace look like? Work structures, the role of teams. Can all organizations be structured into teams? What about the team of teams? Leadership is getting a massive amount of information. What kind of leadership do we require? Is it the same as before, or is there a dramatic change? And then, of course, the whole issue of employee well-being, given the highly emotional nature of our context at the moment. In the discussion, we may really say less, I think, spontaneously about business survival. We think we can all accept that point. Less about the specific technological platforms that one could use. But I do think we may touch on the last three bullets in different ways. So I'm giving back to Nicola and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks very much, Jopie. I'm going to take the opportunity now to leap into our Q&A session. And the first question that I have for the panel is, based on everything that you've spoken about, Jopie, in the introduction, the context that we're facing, and the last 62 days now that we've been in lockdown and forced to work virtually, what stands out for you now that we all have to work in virtual teams?
Thank you, Nicola. Just a few thoughts in that regard. It was, and it still is, incredibly interesting to observe those people and those organizations that we can describe as early adopters. It's as though there are people with or without the parachute that has just initially been shocked and then embraced this new world, both in terms of staff or employees, as I say, and client organizations as well. One could see the shock initially in the sense of, no, but that won't work type of response, and quickly after that to say, but let's talk about that again. How would that look, and what would be the benefit? I think the other thing that links to that very clearly is an awareness of the importance of personality. For me personally, it has been immensely important, and in fact like a lifeline, to actually know who it is that we are talking to from a personality point of view, in terms of the people in the teams, their preferred styles, their hot buttons, what would derail them, what would stress them, what their needs are. So a thorough understanding of the people and the hardwiring of the people, I think, has been immensely valuable. A third point, and then I'd like to give over to Renate as well. I'd like to know, Renate, if you have the same experience, but it has been incredibly important to communicate. But not all people listen for the same kind of communication. One, understanding the personality and the personality structure makes a massive difference. Some people just want the detail. Other people want the big picture. Where are we going? What are we doing? How are we going to survive? Some people want to know the critical bottom line facts, the numbers and the figures, whereas other people want to know, do you care? Are you sure that you have a depth of understanding of my unique situation? So personality for me has been immensely valuable in managing through these turbulent days.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree, Jopie. I think just in terms of how people understanding yourself and managing yourself, and I think I will talk to that again a little bit later on some of the other questions, particularly is important. In terms of what stands out for me, now that we have to work in or with virtual teams literally on a daily basis all the time, I was thinking about it, that there's a saying that, power reveals who you truly are. And it's interesting to note that the more power people get, the more freedom they feel they have to be themselves, their authentic selves. And you will see them acting consistently with their own goals and their own values. So when you work virtually, you actually have more power. You have power over what you do, when you do it, how you do it, and you also have more freedom, except perhaps under lockdown. But I mean, in general, you have more freedom about at least your day and how you structure your day. However, we know that with freedom comes a lot of responsibility. So it does take more from a leader to lead virtual teams. More time, more planning, more support, more interaction with intent, especially better understanding of more time spent on understanding my team, linking to what Jopie said about personality, and also more administrative tasks, thinking, purposefully planning your day, and the meetings. So one has to be specifically even more aware of managing your own reputation within your team. When we work virtually, we will reveal who we truly are. So our fault lines will get exposed, and we need to better know what they are so that we can manage when they do get exposed. And this is also true for team members, of course, because there's an even bigger need in these times for teams to step up to the challenge of contributing to the organization's value proposition, helping the business to survive, standing together as a team, supporting each other. So yeah, that mainly is one of the main things that is standing out for me.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think while you showed your slide of the people falling Jopie, and some people be more ready than other people, I think my biggest lesson in these days was not to make any assumptions. So I've been working more than a year ago. I moved more than 1,000 kilometers away from the office where my team sits. And the year was difficult and there were a lot of learnings, but we actually managed quite well during these times. We were quite productive. We continued with our normal activities and our connectedness. But it was extremely interesting to see how some people found it more challenging to actually now work virtually. And I guess there's many reasons for this. For example, you mentioned personality, Jopie. And being comfortable with technology, and I guess everyone's circumstances at home also, of course, plays a role in how ready you are for this. But for me, when I thought about it, I thought that one of the biggest factors that influence the success of a virtual team is almost the level of personal agency and preparedness in making this shift towards virtual teams. So it's one thing if you decide yourself that you are going to work in a virtual team, but if you are forced to work in a team, like for example lockdown, I think there's quite a big difference there. And I think if we have to go back to before the lockdown, I would definitely maybe focus a little bit more on preparing everyone, especially psychologically, to deal with such a situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Karina. I think they probably reflect many of the experiences that our attendees have had today. And we've had a couple of comments coming in through the chat. So thank you very much. Please keep them coming in. So in light of those, initial learnings, I'm going to run a poll at the same time now, but can I ask the panelists then, and perhaps Renate, if we start with you, what has been your biggest challenge then working with your team virtually?
Okay, so I will share with you perhaps personal, but also what I've picked up with clients. So I've been working virtually a little bit longer than Karina, and also moved 1,000 kilometers, more than 1,000 kilometers from where the biggest part of the team is. So I was also not, faced with a looming lockdown. I really did not consider what would happen, though, was that the anxiety and the insecurity associated with a literal transformation to virtual overnight meant that people, managers, teams started reverting to scheduling virtual meetings for everything. And meeting overload, really became a problem. So what would have been a desktop, or in my case, a telephone discussion, now demanded formal time in my diary. This very quickly led to congestion, a little time to focus on work, an increase on response time, or a need for quick response into late hours of the night. I have checked in with numerous clients, and they all share the same experience. And if I look at what the poll is bringing, I'm seeing that it's a lot similar with our attendees as well. So one needs to be very purposeful and specific with meetings to engage with intent, and I'm sure that some of my colleagues will also add to that as well. Just another little thing, well, it's not a little thing, it's actually a big thing. One may think that, when you are removed from others interpersonally, meaning that you're not in close connection or contact with people on a daily basis, that there may be less politics. But if we think about politics, issues such as politics or interpersonal dynamics, and even incivility, virtual teams are less in each other's faces, and there may be less direct interaction, but the need for connection and trust is still there. So, and it's even more critical. So let me share an example of a client we worked with recently. In this case, personal agendas, unconscious biases, egos, and the like seriously damaged the ability of this team to fulfill its core purpose. They were not able to align to the team's mission, and instead of focusing on the results the team needed to achieve, a lot of emotional energy was wasted, I have to say, and time was wasted on discussing operational issues, debating simple decisions, having academic email showdowns, and even plain incivility. So for those of you who know the concept of incivility, it talks to disrespect and rudeness. And this incivility damaged relationships beyond repair. Although it was at its worst when they had in-person meetings, it was ever present in all interaction. So that incivility spreads like a cancer, and unfortunately for virtual teams, I believe that there is the potential that it stays hidden for longer, and therefore when it is eventually exposed, it is actually quite widespread and difficult to treat. So for me, those are two of the main things that stand out as being challenges for teams.
Thanks, Renate. Karina, would you like to add to that?
Well, I cannot agree more with Renate when she refers to the number of meetings that have exponentially increased in the last couple of weeks. One, I've actually stalked the diaries of some of my colleagues just to see where do they find the time to actually do their job, or to put the ideas that we generate during these meetings, where do they find the time to actually do their work. I think what happens was that, or what's happening currently, is that many of us in this new situation, we force our thinking into a mindset of over-inclusion. And maybe what is my own mistake as well is my fear of missing out. So if someone invites me to a meeting, I think it's very important that I realize, or in my mind, I think it is important for me to attend. There would have been a very good reason for that person to invite me. And if I don't attend that meeting, of course, I feel that maybe it shows a lack of respect and interest into the topic of discussion, which maybe links a little bit onto Renate's concept of incivility as well. So I think now that we realize, and I mean the polls has also shown, the poll results that you show that meeting overload is really a problem. And I think it's important that we actually have to put some good measures or ground rules in place to maintain a high level of productivity and efficiency during times where we work as virtual teams. And I think one thing that was really liberating for me was when we voiced our permissions to one another in the team, that it's okay to decline attending or decline an invitation to attend the meeting. Of course, depending on how relevant this meeting is for you as part of your specific role. We also agreed to keep one another in the loop of everything, but it doesn't mean that we have to respond to everything. So maybe one or two more practical tips as well. I think before we set up any meetings, we actually have to ask ourselves whether this topic, is it not something that can be resolved in a quick writing and an email or so? And that, of course, also provides the receiver of the message the opportunity to actually respond in a time that suits them well. Also, I think if we set up meetings, we shouldn't just include everyone, but we must make sure that there's good representation from all the relevant units that can take responsibility to convey the important information back to that unit. Have a clear agenda, have a clear goal in mind of what you want the outcome of the meeting to be. And maybe a last step, we all know that that the Parkinson's law that states work expands to full time available for its completion. So it doesn't, I don't think we have to feel that all meetings does have to be scheduled for an hour. It doesn't, if you have time, we will fill that time. And sometimes we will actually go over the meeting time as well, just because we can, because we do. So I think it's maybe a good idea to also sometimes stand while you are having some of the shorter meetings.
Yeah, I agree more. I have to say the biggest challenge is definitely the meetings and a diary that is so fully scheduled, and that then goes into the blurred boundaries, you know, that your day starts at 7 and you find yourself 10:30 at night and you are still responding to emails. And I know there were examples that us as a group were communicating to each other at 11:30 certain evenings because the day just didn't have enough hours. It's, even though you cognitively know that you have to ensure, you personally have to take responsibility for your own balance and your own boundaries, it is extremely difficult actually to enforce that. It's very tempting just to go on a little bit more and a little bit more. I'd like to add one other comment as well about the biggest challenge from my perspective. And it's not something we specifically asked on the polling questionnaire, but for me, the complexity of all of this was really interesting as well. So the complexity from a very operational level, does the technology work for everybody? Who do we need to ask to fix what? Right through to the highly emotional state of people, their needs, their need for checking in on them, caring, understanding their personal circumstances, right through to the alignment of team members and their leader in their happening as it should, right through to the permeable boundaries between teams or amongst teams. So are we actually able to make sure that all of us are strategically aligned and going in the same direction? And I think an added element there for me was, it's not just the complexity, the progressive complexity of this, because people are now sitting also elsewhere. So it's not as easy as popping in quickly and asking a question or observing the non-verbals. It's all virtual, where the non-verbals are basically excluded. So also the exhaustion of all of the screen time, and there's more literature coming through now about reasons for that exhaustion, how it is so against our nature not to be able to observe the non-verbals. I think a last comment, just back to the complexity for me, is that we so often think that a problem is binary. We need to care for the people, or we look at bottom line. And in fact, the complexity of the situation is it's not or, it is and. So getting that balance between the care and the empathy and the understanding, but also knowing the ultimate empathy is how well it goes with the company. So your bottom line, your hardcore output, financial results, and to keep all of those things in balance, I think is quite challenging.
Absolutely. Thanks. Sorry, Joop. Did you want to add something to that?
I think just in hindsight, I also think it would have been great, I echo what Karina said, to have been able just to have a week or two to prepare the teams for what would lie ahead. From a wellness perspective, from a structuring perspective, from a protocol perspective. What do we do? What don't we do? Because little things, as I said, personality for me has been absolutely an anchor for me, that you actually see the introverted people by preference are just too quiet. They're not providing maybe all the information they can, or that, you know, so you see the personality play out. And it would have been great if it's not just facilitated by a leader, but it's knowledge of each and every person within that team, so that they develop their own protocol in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I must say, Nicola, there's amazing comments coming through from the attendees.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Renate. I was just going to say there have been really fantastic insights in the chat. So I hope that you're all following that. Just for a little bit of insight, Josh Galb said that they changed their calendar meeting time to 20 minutes instead of the standard 30, or 50 minutes instead of the 60, which at least, well, if it only gives you thinking time, but at least maybe some time to go grab a cup of coffee or dash to the bathroom. I suppose it's also one of those practical things that you can implement. I've also found that it helps to sort of defend some space in your diary by blocking it out to allow you to focus, because those little half an hour to get on thinking time sometimes really does get in the way.
Nicola, also from a physical perspective, whether it's true or not, I read an article yesterday, it's actually more dangerous health-wise to sit too much, to be inactive, than it is to smoke. Yeah. So it really is a wellness. Whether that's fake news, I don't know. But
not a lot of opportunity smoking at the moment.
Natasha also suggests moving away from terminology like meetings, so that you give the scheduled time a think tank or a table talk that also focuses the kind of interaction that it would be, which is really nice as well. So thanks everyone for your chats, and please keep them coming in. And I think, you know, you all mentioned the impact that this has on the work-life balance, which stands out as the most important aspect from the results of the poll. And I think any of these would contribute essentially to that experience of work-life balance. If we then move on to the next question, when managing these virtual teams, what would you recommend for leaders of virtual teams then to help manage their teams more effectively? Karina, maybe if we start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. You know, Jopie and Renate both referred to, or Jopie specifically, the whole idea of personality and the impact that your personality plays in terms of a leader, also plays in situations like this. And then, of course, the whole idea of knowing your personality. So as a leader, I think you must know yourself very well. You must know your team extremely well. You must know your skills very well, your interpersonal skills, your personal skills. And I think when you know yourself well, you will be able to listen between the lines if we have these meetings, and also to respond in the best possible way. I think it's important that you as a leader need to know what is needed for yourself, but also for each member of your team, what is needed to function effectively. And I think you as a leader, you need to try to best address these needs. And often it's emotional needs that we have to address. I also think that a leader needs to foster and nurture a sense of belonging. I mean, everyone, almost all people, have a desire to feel part of a team. And the other day, one of our clients actually said what happened in his instance is the distance actually brought him closer to the team. And that was such a beautiful analogy of, you know, regardless of the physical space, we can actually work towards making a team closer. In short, maybe a leader should sharpen all the tools in his or her emotional intelligence toolkit in things like this, but also when we work with virtual teams going forward, and we know that it's going to happen more and more, regardless of when lockdown is over or COVID is over.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. Yep, do you want to add something to that?
You know, come from a long history where all of us understand the theory about teams, how teams are formed, and the whole issue of team building. We all, well, grew up with it, understand the theory, have done it. I just think that this time that we're in and the future that we're going in, we need to be very careful how we think about teams. And a leader of a team should really have the people in the team that should be in the team. Historically, sometimes you had a combination of a volunteer or volunteers, and historically people were there and they just remain in the team. And then sometimes when we were called in for team building, many of us, it would be because the conflict has evolved to such an extent. It could be politics, it could be this person doesn't do his work, or whatever the case may be, or it's not a good leader, etc. I honestly think going forward, we need to think of teams as, how do I construct the best possible team given the purpose of the team? So for a leader, I would say, please remember that in terms of cognitive and technical capabilities, those are threshold capabilities. In your team, if you really want to be close to the client, fast-moving, productive, you need to look for cognitive or technical capabilities. You need to make sure that the social and interpersonal capabilities are there to be able to negotiate with each other. The maturity is there. The task conflict is not really conflict, but it should be sort of managed in a way that it doesn't become a relationship conflict. It's important that the team, that they fit, whether it is from an interest or an experience or a value perspective. So from a leader's perspective, please make sure you've got the best possible team given the reliance or output that you have to provide. Make sure you've got the best possible people there. And then in terms of style of leadership, this may be sort of debated, but I think it's a very different style of leadership that we're going to have. It cannot be the typical autocratic, egocentric type of leadership this becomes the, and I can't remember which article I read that in, but they spoke about the gardener. It is actually planting the seeds and making sure that the soil is conducive to growth. So your leader becomes the facilitator, the enabler, the carer, the person that, as Karina says, can create a sense of us, even though it is a highly emotionally charged time, and it will stay like that for a long period of time. So able to balance task, output, and care. And a leader like that cannot be ego-driven. I think the other things about leadership is we'll have to rethink onboarding. We'll have to rethink performance management, new protocols, as we said. So quite a different kind of requirement for leaders.
If I can come in there, I want to mention two things here. I mean, apart from everything else that has been mentioned as well, and I'm sure that there are many more as well, but the two things I think particularly stands out for me is psychological safety, and then again the concept of self-awareness that Karina also spoke to. So in a logically safe environment, or in a psychologically safe environment, it is incredibly important, or is required for team performance. Sorry. So this is a concept that was described by, or was particularly researched by Amy Edmondson. And she talks about a psychologically safe team as one where individuals feel they can speak up, they can express their concerns, they can be heard, and full of fear. Also, we know that they are more interested in learning, in excellence, in genuinely connecting with others, and it's not about them just looking good. So it has been shown again and again that psychological safety unlocks creative and productive collaboration. Psychological safety is grown and built through interaction. So in distributed teams, there is less time for that interaction. So a critical factor is to create more time for interaction, but not just on topics or the business agenda. So I think one or two things that one can just, basic tips that leaders can look at here is to create a culture of one-on-ones, and make sure to add it into the agenda. So because space in the agenda, we will do it. So create that culture of having one-on-ones with people, checking in with them, and not only about work, about them, what is working for them, what's not working for them, and how you can support them to enable them. That obviously entails that there needs to be clarity of goals and responsibilities and all of that. Then secondly, one needs to create regular opportunities for spontaneous team conversation. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, regular opportunities for spontaneous conversation, but it's exactly what it is. Where we are talking about things and people are almost free to drop in or drop out of the conversation, because it's not an expectation that you should be there. It's almost like you are stopping by and having a cup of tea with each other. So that would have been a water cooler discussion, or people just sitting around having lunch. We actually now have to create time to do this in a virtual way. And if you are a driven team, you can easily be led to believe or would consider thinking that that's a waste of time. We have other more prudent things to deal with. But I think one needs to experiment with the themes of these meetings. I think most popular ones are your typical stand-up meetings of, scrums, or like someone suggested, they 20-minute meetings, etc. Those are your popular daily check-in ones. But I've also heard of roundtable meetings where people are just sitting together working, but they're not really talking, but at least they feel that we are in the same virtual room. Also, if you are a culture that maybe has a lot of celebration as part of what you do, you can create an happy hour, or you can create a time to have tea or a braai. Or even exercise, and give challenges to each other as well. So creating those regular opportunities for spontaneous conversation where people are invited They can drop in or drop out if they have time, but they should be wanting to be there. And then the beauty of it all is that you can get feedback, because we are all individuals and we are all individual teams as well, and we are unique. So you can get feedback from the team, what works, what doesn't work, and revise and find a rhythm and a habit that works for the team. So we need to use effective tools like whatever platform you are using to create these habits for you and your team. And then, of course, I think the one other thing is that we need to root out incivility in any shape and form. I just want to make one last comment. I know that our time is also coming to a close, but as Karina mentioned around self-awareness, specifically as much as it goes to our derailers, we are seeing at the moment with ourselves, with our clients, that it is just like the derailers are just, it's rearing its ugly head all over. And if you don't know what derailers are, they are those typically strong personality characteristics that become overused when we are stressed, we're tired, or not, we are not managing our reputation. And as a leader, you are your reputation. So what people think about you, and even as a team member, is your reputation is what will make or break you. Now, in virtual teams, we see that there is an ideal breeding ground for these derailers to pop up when we least expect them. And many of our clients are attesting to the fact that they are seeing this coming out more, and that we need to be aware of it so that we can manage it. If you are aware of your own derailers, if you're aware of your team's derailers, if you have open conversations about it, make it part of the conversation, air it, agree on strategies to deal with it. So that when you lose your cool, or you suddenly start micromanaging, or you become too risk averse, or you go underground, or whatever it is that you do when you derail, you can, it can be surfaced, it can be named, it can be understood within context. It can also be interpreted with understand, and even deflate potential conflict situations because we are aware of it and we can talk about it in an open manner. So then we can apply more effective strategies. But I'm talking too much now, so let me stop there.
Renate, we might pick up some of those points in the last, and I really would like to have a little bit of time to talk about some of the questions that have come through from the audience. While we move on to the next one, so it follows on pretty closely from our last question, is then what would you recommend for, if I am moving, there we go, for members of a team? So we've spoken then about leaders. I think one of the points you made is having some time available outside of where you would normally grab a cup of coffee with a co-worker and so on. So keeping those in a way that can be informal, and a lot of the attendees have indicated they have virtual coffee breaks and things like that. And that doesn't have to necessarily be scheduled by the leader themselves, it allows the team members to have their own initiative. But Jopie, maybe you'll kick us off here as team members of virtual teams. What is it that you would recommend?
It struck me, and I go a little bit again towards the personality side. It struck me that it's often people who are very high in conscientiousness that run the risk of that just a little bit more. I just need to do a little bit extra. And then I start worrying about the downside of that and the possibility of burnout, etc. So my first comment is one with that in mind, where I say there are many benefits of working in a virtual team. You don't have to go through the traffic. You're hopefully comfortably at home. Nobody is eating your yogurt. You're saving a little bit of money. Lots of benefit. And I'm picking up so many people who seem to feel somehow guilty about that. So my first comment to team members are, and I absolutely agree with the poll, if they are very clear about the output that is expected of them. And I want to add to that, there's a clear, fair way of measuring that output. Then please take a deep breath and enjoy the benefits of this new kind of working. So as long as we are clear about the output, then to some extent those with young children, and it may be difficult because you need to do homeschooling with them at the moment, but you are working from whatever, 8 to 10 tonight when they sleep. It's your choice, but appreciate the benefits and don't go looking for feelings of guilt necessarily. Of course, that's just a portion of personality sort of characteristics I'm talking about. The second one, I want to say, and I'm going to say it very quickly, there's a level of maturity required because you are now taking responsibility for your own output. Less blame, less playing the victim. So we are asking for maturity. The tools we'll provide you with or would like for you to take on would be self-awareness, interpersonal awareness, awareness of your whatever it is. But there is a personal responsibility that is essential for output and for self-management and understanding of others. And in terms of the understanding of others, that disease called the be like me disease, we have to break through that because not everybody is the same, not everybody has the same priorities, not everybody has the same work methodology. So we need to create a tolerance and an openness and a flexibility for different people in the team. That's why I go back to, I think it's so important to know what the output is and how that is measured, because then we can allow for some freedom in that regard. But I know, Renate, Karina, you've got thoughts about that too.
Yeah, I think very much what you say. If you want to be an effective member of a virtual team, it's very similar to an effective member of a in-person team. You cannot be effective if team members are not engaged, they're not present, they're not connected. If we take meetings as an example, it's very easy to get distracted and to multitask while you're in a virtual meeting. So we're in this meeting, we're talking about stuff at the same time I'm getting my emails done, at the same time I'm checking this and that and the next thing. But that enhances the chance that you will miss out on important information. You will maybe not be clear on your expectations. There will be misunderstandings and assumptions and the like. So absolutely making sure that you understand what is expected from you, what the timelines and the deliverables are, and that your understanding aligns also so that you're on the same page with your manager and other team members. I think in a virtual environment, we have to actually make double sure that we check that there's a shared understanding of expectations. And then ask if you're unsure. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So you need to talk and speak up. It doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert or a whatever it is, empathetic, less empathetic, you have to actually speak to be heard if you are in a virtual team.
Now, I agree. There's not much more that I can add to what Jopie and Renate said now, but Renate, if you say, you have to speak up and so I agree that it remains each team member's responsibility to be actively involved or an active participant in the team, regardless of where your office is. But I think we must also, we shouldn't forget about the other team members. Due to the more independent roles and personality characteristics of some of the team members, maybe it's easier for some to become more invisible virtual team members. And they may easily feel disconnected from the team. We know that may lead to a whole lot of issues. Just an interesting experience that our team had, I think last week, Friday. We usually work on one specific platform within the JVR group. And we changed platforms. It was just changing the environment almost, the technological environment. And it created a completely almost different kind of sense of connection, almost a more informal connection than just this work connection that we are talking about all the time as well. So we actually decided in our team that for more checking in on a more almost social level, connecting with one another on a more social level, we are going to maybe consider a different kind of platform to the one that we usually have for meetings. So just a very practical idea.
Thanks, Karina. And I think looking for what is the practical advice that I can take and use to really get the most out of not only my team but myself. How do I manage myself in this kind of virtual environment as well? So I've shared the poll results from what people felt would help most, and that was very much in line with what you were saying, Jopie, the clear expectations of the output. But I know that there have been comments throughout the chat around tips that people have provided to everyone. We're not really going to have enough time to entertain questions through the QA, but what I will do is, where you've asked specific questions, we'll to those anyway, I think, and share those with the team members after that in a follow-up email perhaps. The chat will, the webinar will be available after the afterwards. So we have recorded this, and we will pick up on all of those points that I think that have come through the chat. They've been very valuable. So unfortunately, we're just about out of time, and I know that a lot of people have to jump to the next meeting.
To the next virtual meeting, yeah.
To the next virtual meeting. Just in summary, Gerard asked, is it a reality that South Africa is going to go forward with virtual teams, or is it just something that we're dealing with at the moment? So just sharing the results from PwC's poll survey that they put out early on in, I think possibly even just before lockdown, around what are your opinions around work going forward. And what was interesting here is that 60% of people felt that remote work is here to stay. So this isn't going to go away. It remains important to us as leaders, as professionals particularly, that we need to ensure that we are really well placed to help our clients to navigate these changes in the nature of work. So I think things that have come out of the talk for me, particularly a pivot around listening very carefully to your clients' needs. Also reflecting on your own experience, because the things that you've gone through, the emotions that you are dealing with, the practical issues that you're facing are things that your clients are going to be going through as well. So looking at what works and what doesn't work from your own experience. I think it's important to speak to fellow practitioners, because as Jopie said, not everyone is in the same boat. People have got different experiences. So to hear what others have to say. I think it's also important to keep an eye on the research and the science. So making sure that while we make decisions, we don't make them in a vacuum, that we do make them based on evidence as far as possible. Obviously, there isn't something that determines the situation, but the research that's been done around working with virtual teams over many, many, many years doesn't go away. And I think it's still really relevant now that people have more experience with that. And I think the last point is to really employ your emotional intelligence skills and work with helping people to cope through developing things like self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and understanding their own personalities and derailers, so that they can better understand those of others. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today. We wish you health and well-being during these exceptional times, and you're so welcome to contact us at JVR if you have any other comments or questions, or if you need help with any particular solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Keep well.
Bye. Keep
Bye-bye.
well. Bye.
Bye, everyone.